welcome to today's podcast episode.
My name is Byron McKinney. I'm part of the S&P Global Market Intelligence team. I look after the trade risk and compliance team within maritime trade and supply chain. Today, we'll take a look at the shipping side on the EU's 11th package. So within the transport section of the actual document itself, there were three key areas which were noted. So the first two kind of deal with ship-to-ship transfers, and then the third one deals with the navigational tracking aspect, which is the AIS transponder and dark activity in general. So for the first two, the EU has pressed a large stress really on the prohibition to EU ports of vessels which have engaged in ship-to-ship transfers of Russian origin oil, which are in breach or outside of the oil price cap. So the two price caps for crude condensates and refined products from December and February. And the second one, which is more broader, but kind of puts the onus on port authorities to kind of understand ship-to-ship transfers, advance notice, and those ship-to-ship transfers which we're calling to EU ports or member state EU ports, or the EEZs of those member states as well. The final one, again, kind of comes back to the AIS navigational tracking and being able to identify any kind of outages on those vessels or dark activity. So a very well-known decepting shipping practice, which has been raised by various regulators, in the US, the EU, and the UK before. But this one here, obviously, very specific and relating to the shipment of Russian oil as well. So we'll take a look at these three in some detail, and we'll try and kind of understand, where we potentially see risk around these. What the data has told us over the last couple of months as well, so from the beginning of 2023, and what the general themes and patterns could actually be, and what people need to look out for across the trade finance supply chain industry. The first kind of key area we'll take a look at is related to ship-to-ship transfer activity within the EU, and also broadly around European Union port visits or port calls. So we've taken a look back through the STS activity, which has been Russian related. So this is information which has been determined since the 5th of December, so the first oil price cap, and the number of STS activities which have been generated from there. And then worked out and provided the insight into which of those STS cargo transfers have also been conducted by vessels which have made EU port calls as well over that same time period. And there are a large number across the full range from those last 7 months. So from December 2022 up to and including July 2023. So 1,028 in total, where there's been STS activity by that vessel for Russian origin oil, and has visited an EU member state port as well. It's important to mention that the caveat that these can be vessels which are working within the price cap. So this is all perfectly fine under the current sanctions legislation. But obviously it does kind of indicate that there is a general higher degree of risk in here as well. As that number's increasing, more vessels are involved in STS transfers, and a lot of those vessels are also, visiting EU ports subsequently as well. The breakdown of that information in terms of, where those vessels conducting STS transfers with Russian partners and Russian origin crude oil, where their next destinations are likely to be, and what ports they've actually called at within the European Union. 4 countries which are the key ones to look out for, so the Netherlands, Spain, Italy, and Greece. Greece obviously tops the chart there really in terms of the amount of port calls which have been made at that time, which I don't think is too surprising. I think the ports around Greece have been involved in moving Russian oil for some time now, and also in terms of STS around the Peloponnese region as well, and Kalamata, which is a particularly important area for ship-to-ship transfers. Other countries obviously have been involved in the same activity as well. So France and Belgium make up a sizable portion behind these four countries, but these are the four which are far and away the biggest ones to be aware of at this particular time. So that kind of gives us a look at the current legislation and pulls apart the first piece from the EU's 11th package on the transport detail. To break that out a little further, we'll just take a look at the actual STS activity for Russian crude only. So I'm not looking at any refined product, but just looking at where, the actual most important and popular discharge locations are, and then the destinations of the actual cargo itself. Where does it go to after the STS? And we can see there's a general pattern, really. Again, Greece, Spain, South Korea, the key countries here which are cropping up. South Korea and Greece are probably the two kind of key hubs at the moment, through May and into June as well. Preceding May, June, Spain was Quetta outside within North Africa, on the North African coast, was a big hub for STS crew transfers, but seems to have dropped off quite quickly over the last 2-3 months as well. So we haven't seen anything there for quite some time, which kind of points to the actual enforcement of the EU ban as it's being put in place as part of the 11th package. But obviously prior to that as well, Spanish port authorities were a little bit more stricter in terms of adhering to kind of self-sanctioning Russian crude imports and STS activity as well. And that has obviously continued. And, May and June have seen the numbers there completely drop. With Greece, though, we've started to see them increase over time as well. So while there was a particular lull in April, they're kind of coming back, not quite to the high point as where they were in February, but into June, we've seen them increase. And they've also supplanted South Korea as the kind of the primary location for transshipment as well. But those are the two kind of key areas, Greek waters around Kalamata, the Peloponnese region, and also into South Korea around Yosu as well is the areas to look out for. Where we just look at the Russian crude destinations for those STS transfers. Again, there's the usual countries which have partnered with Russia over the last 6 months as well. So China, Indonesia, and India have all been the recipients of pretty much quite a lot of the oil from STS activity. And the one kind of key thing here to point out as well is in June, a new country has appeared. So Pakistan, for the first time, has been the recipient of a Russian crude STS cargo. Not a huge one, but it's kind of significant in terms of, a new partner, a new country, which is now available within that list. So that kind of takes us through the STS and the ship-to-ship transfer information. The next piece, which the EU has called out within the 11th package. So we've taken a look at the Russian EEZ, so the exclusive economic zone around Russian ports. And the actual dark activity around those Russian ports has increased in the second quarter. This is kind of significant in terms of how Russia has been able to move oil over this particular period. The ability to obscure the origins of the cargo by using feeder shuttle vessels and other types of vessels as well to be able to move that oil. By obscuring those origins, by being dark within those particular locations, kind of helps, move that oil and try to kind of, provide that tactic to be able to then, transship it, move it to various destinations whilst hiding its ultimate origin. A lot of the destinations where the cargoes have then moved on to have been, in Europe, Central West Asia, Middle East in Q1 this year, but has dropped back in Q2 as well. So a very, kind of general picture here, but it is an important one. And obviously, that origin as to where the oil comes from and how it's hidden is important to kind of be aware of here as well. It's also important in the context of, where we've seen some of the most clear examples of how Russian oil has moved over the last few months as well in 2023. Multiple STS engagements, dark activity there as well. And the obvious example, which people are mostly aware of, with the port of Tarragona in Spain, which refused entry to a tanker which had been through multiple transshipments originating from around the Tuapse coast or port within Russia as well. There's been a very clear one as well. So this is a potential sanctions evasion tactic which is being used by Russia in this case as well. And it also kind of comes into the other kind of secondary example around this as well, which is spoofing the actual position and the movement of the vessel as well, to be able to again obscure the origins of that particular cargo. So whilst the EU kind of talks within the 11th package around understanding AIS, understanding STS, where they're being conducted, how they're being performed, and where the ultimate destinations of those cargoes is, there is a kind of a secondary piece to this as well, which we think is important. So we would like to bring to your attention kind of ship ownership and the patterns which are emerging here as well. So we think this is very important because, trying to understand if a potential vessel or the participants behind it are likely to evade sanctions, you kind of need to understand the ownership of the vessel, where it's located, what they've been involved in, what kind of fleet they have, and how that fleet is actually managed. And one of the key things here is learning around the examples of single ship fleets. So these are fleets which obviously, have a single vessel within them. So they're being fragmented, but there are kind of relationships and patterns which kind of bind these together. And we'll kind of take a look at this in a moment or two, of companies where, Russian vessels or previously Russian-owned, operated or flagged vessels have been moved out into other locations, into other maritime firms, and they've been done so as part of single ship fleets. So registered ship owners who have just a single ship within their fleet has been increasing a lot over the last couple of years. So in 2021, an increase of 62% at that time, declined slightly in 2022, slight drop off, not huge. The interesting point is, in 2020 was OFAC's first maritime advisory, which was a large document which talked about ship ownership and some of the ways in which companies have obscured their locations or their group owners. After the publication of that document, that's where you've then seen that big rise over 2021. And into 2022 as well, the number has still stayed quite high. So a clear kind of correlation between, new regulation and then obviously the ability by those who want to evade sanctions to do it in particular ways. And one of those ways has obviously been through the single ship fleet basis and how they've been able to kind of hide the group owner or the real, ultimate origins and ownership of the vessels themselves. When we kind of break that down and we have a look at registered owners, we can kind of see that many of them are within kind of countries where, general flags of convenience are found, Marshall Islands, Liberia, Panama, some larger numbers there. But there are also, European Union countries in there as well. We can see Germany, the Netherlands, Malta as well, where these have been based. So, there isn't anything wrong technically with a single ship fleet, but it does kind of overlay, a risk element on top of it when it's coupled with other activity as well. So, understanding who owns the vessel, is it a single ship fleet? What kind of flag it works with? Has it been engaged in STS activity, dark activity, where those STS activities have been taking place? You can kind of build up a picture and a scenario there as well. And, obviously it's kind of key to be aware that STS isn't illicit activity. It's a common shipping practice. But being able to determine, which is an STS which is seeking to evade sanctions can be hard to identify. So these ship ownership patterns are important to be aware of and important to remember. So as we talked about single ship fleets, the Russian fleet itself has kind of broken out into many of these SSFs. Gatic Ship Management, which is located in India. It used to control around 55 vessels within the fleet, but over the last 2 to 3 months, beginning in April, has started to kind of fragment and break itself out. And at the moment, the Gatic Ship Management firm, as it's kind of called and as it's organized, at the moment now only covers 3 vessels. So, at least 50 or so vessels have kind of moved away. They've gone into other registered owners. And those registered owners have kind of broken out into those single ship fleets as well. So you see Gatic, which was a kind of a big media story previously is kind of, unwinding and has the potential for kind of not being a name which will be around for very much longer. All of its vessels has moved into those single ship fleets, but the kind of relationships between them is still kind of obvious. You can still spot them based on, where they're based, mostly in Mumbai in India, and in some cases based within the same building and even the same room or a similar floor in that building as well. So that Gatic fleet, to all intents and purposes, looks like it's kind of broken up. It's owned by different people, but kind of further analysis and when you break it down and you take a closer look, you can still see the relationships are still there. But this is a tactic to obscure, who the group owner is, where it's based, what the fleet is made up of. And the same information, the same detail is there around other companies, not just within India, but also in the UAE as well. So we see, examples such as Fractal, K&O, Radiating Marine also, follow a similar type of pattern as well. So you can see the number of registered owners for these three firms, not quite as extreme as Gatic, but obviously following a particular pattern as well. They've increased the number of registered owners, they've fragmented the ownership level. And it's, a clear indication of trying to obscure, who is that owner. And this kind of, obviously portrays a degree of risk really to those who from, risk and compliance screening departments across the trade finance supply chain industry who need to try and understand this as well. Just a final point as well is whilst these ship ownership companies are fragmenting into smaller firms and a bit more disparate, there is a concentration though to certain types of flags. So Gatic is a kind of example where, there's a large number of registered owners, 45 plus, but now they've all started to kind of move over to the Gabon flag. So previously they had a nationality with, countries like Marshall Islands, Panama, Liberia, St. Kitts and Nevis, but have moved now since April, May over to Gabon as well. So kind of, slightly lower down into the flag of convenience world as well. So again, key thing to be aware of, that kind of extra scrutiny on Gatic over the last couple of months, obviously, has kind of led to new ways of trying to, obscure where the fleet is located, who owns it and where it's registered as well. It's been great content on the shipping segment. I hope those who have tuned in have enjoyed it as well. And there's a lot to take away also. Thanks, everyone.